So good evening, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Biz Talk, the Black Economic Empowerment and Business Show with myself, Ade Shakoya, who's the host. As you know, the show is brought to you by Circulate. Circulate exists as a platform which intends to increase the amount and the length of time that the money stays within the Black community. And as you know, we bring to this forum as part of the conversation those within the community who are doing, and internationally. So when I say community, I'm talking local and global, who are doing great things to not just help the Black community, to help the people in general. Because if you remember, we are a community as part of a community, which is a global community, something that has become even more clearer since we move into the age of digital, whereby you can send a message to somebody in Nigeria or Australia and get a response back in seconds. And right now, just as we're streaming here, digital platform, people are viewing it all around the world. But not only are they viewing it live, they also get to watch it on replay. This is the power of the digital age that we live in. And today I'm blessed to have an awesome woman who I've known for many, many years. In fact, I've used her services. She's inspired me. There's going to be some stuff I'm going to share with you, Marilyn, that you might not even know yet, but I'll share it with you as we go through our conversation today. But yeah, I'm honored and blessed to have Marilyn Devonish with us today. Hey, Marilyn.
Hey, Adi, how are you doing? It's been such a long time. It's brilliant to see you.
It is, and that's the thing about it. Like we're talking about the digital stuff, so I get to see you. I get to see the stuff that you're doing. Get to be inspired by it. But yeah, obviously we don't get to talk as much as we used to, and even now, so with the lockdown, people don't get even the opportunity to run into people like, oh wow, hi, I haven't seen you in ages, and all that type of stuff. But before we go into our conversation, for those who might be listening right now, can you just quickly tell us a little bit about who you are and how you came to be here?
Who I am and how I came to be here, that's a very big question. So for the past 20 years, let's just start there for now. I've been a coach and therapist, specializing in working with people when I first started around things like confidence, self-esteem, working on limiting beliefs, mindset, imposter syndrome, how to next level your skills. I'm also a certified photo reading instructor, so the whole how to read at 25,000 words per minute and get through a whole book in 5 minutes and remember and recall what you've read. And I've been doing that. Next month will be 19 years. So time really flies with that. I'm also a mental health first aid trainer, which means going into organizations to train their staff to be first point of contact, to have those kinds of conversations. And I've been working with clients globally around the world online. First started off on the old telephone since 2005. So 15 years before the big pandemic pivot. And one thing that people maybe don't really know about me is I've also been a remote and flexible working implementation consultant since 2003, which means going into organizations to implement, write, and put in place remote and flexible working policy and strategy. Everything from procurement of technology, ergonomics, helping to redesign spaces, right through to the psychology of being remote or working from home. So I have to say, in conclusion to that intro, the new normal is my old normal. So that's a quick summary. And how I came to be here, if we just go back a little step further, at age 32, I contemplated suicide and had accidentally signed up for a personal development course, which I did try to get out of, and they wouldn't give me a refund. So went along full of anger because they're now going to waste 7 days of my time, and came out the other end just like, whoa. So I gave up. I was studying to be a chartered accountant at that time. So I gave up the accountancy studies and decided to become a coach and therapist and NLP trainer instead. And the rest, as they say, is history.
Wow, so many things are packed in there. Very interesting. So that course that you went on to, that they wouldn't give you a refund, you're a bit like me. I'm like that. So for those of you from Nigeria who know, I'm Ijebu, and everybody knows that Jebus are tight. Yeah, we like to save money, and if we're forced to save money, believe you me, we're gonna take every last bit of what we've paid for. So I can hear that. If I can't get a refund, I'm gonna be there from beginning to end. I'm not leaving until I get all of my money. Which personal development event was that anyway?
It was the NLP training. Now, I thought I'd signed up for a community because I was very quiet and very shy, very low confidence, very low self-esteem. Wow. Could barely even speak to my own family. So I thought I had signed up for a communication skills course. I thought it was a bit expensive. It's like £2,500 or something like that. So I'm like, this is a lot. But okay, if you're going to teach me how to communicate with confidence, I'm in. And then when I got the joining instructions, it talked about hypnosis, timeline therapy, and Huna. I'm like, no. no, I'm not into all that stuff. I need my refund. And they wouldn't. So it turned out to be a full-on practitioner training. But
Right.
by
Okay.
the end, I was like, oh my God. So I went back and I did the master practitioner about 3 weeks later. And then I spent several more £1,000 in May 2001 to become a trainer of NLP, a trainer of hypnosis, and a trainer of timeline therapy, because it just blew my mind that I could go from suicidal, as I always say, to Samaritan pretty much overnight. And when I work with clients for just one day, we'll do a breakthrough session, their whole life has changed. So I was like, whoa, I can't not do this.
Wow. I mean, I guess that's one of the things that happen in life sometimes as well. Life sometimes takes us down a path that we're supposed to go down. Sometimes we might even try and fight it and resist it. And I know I've been guilty of that so many different times. But actually, when you're forced into it, and I like the part where you said when you turned up angry, like, yeah, I don't want to be here. Yeah.
I was vexed.
Yeah.
For the first 2.5, 3 days, I sat like this. But no, that's not even true. This is the actual pen I use. I still have it to this day.
Oh, wow.
I'm keeping copious notes, and I'm like, well, that don't make sense. Well, that would never work. And every opportunity, my hand was up in the air asking questions, because I'm like, I'm going to catch you out. This is nonsense. There's no way you could talk to someone who is at the depths of despair, because this was only in the October 2000, and I was contemplating suicide the month before.
Wow.
And you know, relationship breakup, I was ill, all sorts of things had happened. But I'm like, there's no way you can tell me that you can just talk to someone for one day and change their life around. No. So I'm just keeping notes. And every time something didn't make sense, I thought, I can catch you out now. I'm there with my question. And of course, the more I asked on some level, the more it kind of started landing with me. And by that middle point, this is what happened. About you're saying about being tight. I'm like, hold on a minute. If I make a nuisance of myself and don't fully participate, because they're like playful out, blah, 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 they're not going to give me a refund. They're going to come with well, Marilyn, you didn't. And I'm like, no, you're not keeping my money. I'm going to jump in now and do every single thing you tell me to do. I'm going to do it with gusto, just so nobody can say to me when I go for my money back that I didn't participate. And that was the plan. But I think because that was the plan, Addy, if I wasn't suicidal when I went, I actually think the training would have gone over my head, and I would have gone, oh, that was interesting. And then I would have got on with my life.
Sure. I think that's another key point, interesting point you raised there. Sometimes, speaking for me, I know that some of the things that I've received in life at a spiritual and a personal development level have been at the point when I'm at the place of no return, where I've tried everything, especially through my own way, and similar to you. Yeah, I think I can use intellect to show these people it's not going to work. I'm going to, be that pain in the butt. I'm going to resist every little thing, or I'm going to speak out against everything. But sometimes even in that, we kind of unravel our own limitations. Like, okay, actually, okay, yeah, what's really going on here? And so I can relate to that. Funny enough, it's like the first time I ever did a personal development event. I think that might have been the first time I saw you, but we'll speak about that a bit later. Was at a Tony Robbins. A friend of mine gave me a ticket to UPW. It was from a Friday through to a Monday. I'm thinking like, what's all this nonsense? But hey, my friends give me this ticket to let me go anyway. And I went there actually on the ego tip, because I'm like, yeah, all I'm going to go is go there and walk on fire. Apparently you're supposed to walk on fire. I'm going to go there and walk on fire. I can do this. I can walk on fire. I turned up on the first day, I think about 7, 8 o'clock. The room was dark. He was doing one of those kind of group meditations. I'm thinking, okay, this is weird. I stayed for a bit. When they did the fire walk, I decided not to participate, because I'm like, oh, he's tricking everybody into doing it, so I'm not going to do it. That came a very interesting lesson for me as well, which is actually, if you set your mind on doing something, regardless of who does and doesn't do it, do it. On the second day, I was there from about 12 o'clock. On the Sunday, I was there before it opened. I was already there. And on Monday, I remember when they were leaving, I'm crying, because I'm like, no, I don't want this to finish. And that started my journey.
I love it.
It's just very awesome. All right, cool. So you're the founder of Trance Formations, which is my understanding is it's a training, consultancy, and coaching company committed to improving, transforming the performance of individuals and organizations. In what ways? I know you touched on a few of the things you do, but in what ways do you go about improving the performance and transforming individuals and organizations?
Well, one of the things, I didn't mention it in the intro because we could be here all night, trust me, is I'm also a corporate trainer. So leadership development training, personal development training, designing and delivering soft skills training. I'm also an executive coach, so going into organizations to coach. And I also do kind of those keynote presentations where you might go in for a lunchtime session, afternoon session, or, you know, an away day, and rally the troops and get people all working in alignment in terms of team building, how they function as an organization. I'm also a Prince 2 project manager. And so that was going into organizations to lead projects. Now, not the kind of projects you would think. I worked mainly in central and local government, so very different kind of thing. And a lot of that was where the remote working, flexible working and smart working came into it, or, you know, doing organization-wide leadership development programs where we're doing everything from going in, scoping what the organization needs, actually designing the program, so creating those handbooks, doing the PowerPoint slides, and then turning up to deliver the training across the organization. And of course, that's also being done online, much more so now than 15 years ago. But yeah, so that's the way it kind of works with organizations.
Okay, yeah, and as you mentioned before, the new norm has always been your previous norm. You've been getting organizations ready for this, similar to some of the work that I do. So a lot of that is actually just kind of COVID has made it more relevant, more stand out, that actually this is just the way things are. So yeah, and you spoke about there. So you go into organizations, you help organizations to be able to kind of improve at team levels, I understand, as well, working with teams, helping them to improve as well.
Absolutely. So there have been times I've coached CEOs, so they are running the whole show or the whole local authority. Sure. And other times I'm working with frontline staff who are out digging graves and cleaning floors and everything in between. And quite frankly, I always say to people, look, I can go into an organization, I can meet the CEO and I can tell you what the team members will be like, or I can meet the team members and I can tell you what the CEO will be like. Right. And that is held true since 2003.
Okay.
And then you now have to pinpoint where the problem is and be delicate sometimes in about how you state that, and other times just be brutally honest and say, this is what I observe and these are the things I think you could do to improve.
And you spoke about that, about, you know, adapting to the new world. How has your company adapted now to going online and being able to deliver a lot of these services online?
I would say the main thing for me, because I started off with telephone coaching. And the reason that happened is I had a woman who phoned me up and she said, I've just seen, because I write for newspapers and magazines, I've been doing that since 2003. So she said, I've read your article in Psychology's magazine. I absolutely loved it. Can I book a breakthrough session, please? I was like, yeah, sure. Where are you based? She said, Birmingham. And I said, no problem. You take a straight train from Birmingham. And I told her which stop. And she went, oh, and there was a moment of silence. She said, Birmingham, Alabama. And I was like, okay. And I was like, well, normally, back in those days, somebody would come in at 10 o'clock in the morning. We work through the whole day. They go out the other end, have a nice life. Their life is transformed. So I said to her, look, here's how it's going to go. We're going to do the breakthrough session in blocks of 2 hours because it's on the phone. And I said, so pay what you pay as normal. I said, however, even if you're happy, if I'm not happy with the breakthrough session, I will give you a full refund, no questions asked. To this day, it's one of the best breakthrough sessions I ever did. And she changed my mindset. But in terms of your question, in terms of what's changed now, my previous challenge over the last 15 years, and I'd say the last 10 to 11 years, because the last 4 or 5 years, my clients are happy to come on to online trainings, workshops, webinars, the whole full day, up to 3 days for the photo reading workshop. Happy to do that. But the biggest battle, I would say, is getting people to believe that you could have the same level of change and transformation and impact online. So that's, and now when what's happened in the last 12 months, the whole world is not, you had no choice. And now I've lost, and I did an interview with BBC Radio 5 Live in March 2020 on the 6th, something like 6, I think it was 6th of March, and I definitely did one on Friday the 13th of March, remember that day. And I said to them, I predict there's going to be a seismic shift in the way we work, and that we will then hear people actually not wanting to go back into the office full time in the way that they previously had been. They are now going to want to either do the majority from home or at least have some flexibility. Whereas previously, just trying to convince them to get out the office, even to go for lunch, That was a big
Tell me about
deal.
it.
And the thing that, I think maybe will surprise people is in September 2019, I was doing some of the more energetic work, doing a bit of a meditation on what does 2020 have in store? And the voice that came into my head said, you need to speak and write about remote and flexible working. Now, I've been working in that field since 2003. I had never, ever, ever, ever written about it publicly.
Okay.
I've written government white papers. I've created intranets so the staff have all the information they need. Never written about it in a newspaper or magazine because it just wasn't that kind of work. By a month later, in October, my first article on remote working came out. This is October 2000. This is 6 months before we even uttered the words COVID-19, lockdown, remote working. And by the time we hit into last March, I'd already started to lose count of the number of articles that I'd written about remote working and flexible working and working from home and all the rest of it, because there was something that said, I think this is going to take center stage in 2020. But the biggest challenge was getting people to realize you can do you can't hug someone, but in terms of delivery and energy and transformation, you can do it online.
And I totally hear you on that one. Having worked in that field for quite a while as well, for the last few years, trying to get organization, especially at the CEO level, to understand that if you could place trust in people, provide them with the right environment, people will get the work done. But there's always that case of, well, no, we need people to be here. We need people to log in. We need people, all of that. And like you said, as soon as we've had this COVID situation now where organizations have been forced into it, now they're seeing that people are delivering. And the interesting thing is lots of organizations are now actually thinking about closing down some of their workspace because they're like, well, hang about. Why do we need to be paying for all of this? People stay at home. We don't need to buy coffees. We don't need to buy teas, run the electricity and all this other stuff, pay the expensive units that we've been paying for. And people getting stuff done. So, I mean, I guess sometimes, and like the Japanese say, every opportunity has a crisis. And so I guess in the silver lining of as part of this, the world is changing. Although for me, I used to commute quite a lot. My commute used to be hours. Now my commute has significantly dropped to less than like a minute. But my midriff section is pain, I have to confess. I'm not getting that as much as I want to. But there you go. So you also mentioned that you used to be, or you were studying to be a accountant. Is that correct? Chartered accountant, did you say?
Yeah, I was studying to be a chartered accountant. And one of the things that had happened with that, I went from being pretty academic, like I did a business degree and a postgraduate marketing diploma with the Chartered Institute of Marketing, worked for a few years as a secretary, probably one of the most qualified secretaries you've ever met with a business degree, etc. Don't get me wrong, nothing wrong with being a secretary. I still use those skills to this day. However, I was working as a secretary because I didn't have the confidence to go for a graduate job, even though I was pretty much top of my class. So after 5 years, decided I was going to go back to studying and do the ACCA and be a chartered accountant. However, because I thought, that as you're an accountant, you won't have to talk to people. I can just sit, tap, tap, tap on the calculator, push numbers, never have to talk to people, which suited my personality. And then I realized pretty quickly that if you're a half decent accountant, you actually communicate. And that's then how I ended up signing up for the NLP training, because I thought, this can't work. What kind of accountant will I be if I can't even look people in the eye and have a conversation? So I did the personal development training. I took a couple of weeks off studying, went to the personal development training. The plan was to just go in the October, go back to my studies and take my exams in the December. Ended up in the December doing the NLP practitioner training. And in the December/January, the company that I trained with offered me a job. So I was like, yes, please. And I, going back to people and saying, oh, I'm giving up the accountancy studies. I'm going to be a hypnotherapist instead. They'll probably like, oh, she's lost her mind. What's going on? It's a cult. But that's the way it happened. So I never completed it. And people now say, oh, I can't imagine you being an accountant. But I could, because I just thought I could continue to hide away and just be in the background.
So I'm going to ask a question here. In all the years that I've known you, I'm surprised to hear you say that you were somebody who had low confidence. You mentioned there that you could even look people in the eye, you couldn't speak or talk to people. For somebody who's watching right now, because I'm sure there must be at least somebody either watching live or at some point might pick this up, who may find themselves in a similar situation. I'm sure many of the listeners as well must be looking and saying, you don't come across as that way. How do they go from where they are, i.e. if there's somebody who's quite shy, who feels like they can't interact with people, to get into somebody like you who It's clearly very articulate, very confident, has the right energy, commands stages. What's the steps they need to take to become that?
Well, thank you, first of all. Do you know Sherry Ann Dixon?
Yes, I do.
Every time, because I used to be on her radio show, and she was on Bang FM back in the day, and I did one of her Facebook lives a couple of weeks ago. To this day, whenever I say, yeah, I used to be very quiet inside, she bursts out laughing. Seriously, I'm like, because I said it on her show, I thought, let me just test, because it's been about 10 years now since she did it again. She just laughed, and she went, she just thinks I'm lying. She just thinks I'm making it up. But the way that you would move from A to B, the quickest route, I would say, is if it's more than just being a little bit nervous, like you got an interview where that's natural. If it's been a long-term thing, like it was my whole life, that was what I was like up until the age of 32, I would say you want to get to the root cause. So for me, the fear, the anxiety, the worry, self-loathing, that was my bag. And the limiting beliefs, just to give you a sense of what I mean by that, mine were along the lines of, I'm not good enough, I'm not capable enough, I'm not worthy enough. And when that pattern was running in my head, why on earth would I ever speak? Who's going to want to hear what I've got to say? I'm not worthy. I'm not capable. I'm not clever. I better just keep my mouth shut and stay in the corner. So that's what I did for the first 32 years on this planet. And then, as my older sister would now say, because we were at a Christmas dinner a few years ago, obviously we weren't in lockdown, and one of my sisters had brought her new partner, and he said, so Marilyn, what do you do? And I could hear my other two sisters, they went, oh God. They're lawyers and accountant, lawyer, accountant, retail. And so you could always hear them groaning. And I'd said to him, I said, oh, well, I used to be very quiet and shy. And then I did a personal development training. And my sister went, she's cooking. And she went, yeah, she ain't shut up since. That's the way that's the way it's been. I can talk for England and Barbados now, because once I found my voice and I realized I did have things that could add value to the world and leave the spaces that I was in somewhat better, more improved than when I first arrived, I'm like, it's almost my duty when I'm given the opportunity to share the things I've been learning so that other people can shift themselves. But I'd say sort out the negative emotions, sort out the limiting beliefs. Once you've done that, it's much easier. In soul plan reading terms, we'd call it your soul destiny, your soul purpose. It's much easier then to be in alignment with that and have the confidence and the courage to live it.
Awesome. Now you've spoken, and thank you very much for sharing that. And I'm sure that there will be at least some seeds of new possibilities for some of the people listening. And I'm sure as we're having this conversation, as we continue in it, there'll be some other seeds that'll be planted that individuals can pick up and turn into some real actionable steps so they can move from A to B. Now, a number of times you've mentioned NLP. For those out there who don't know what NLP is, what is it? And also, for me, I guess, for me, this is also a very important question. What is it equally not?
NLP stands for neuro-linguistic programming. In a nutshell, how the mind and body and your thoughts, your senses, how they all interact and impact each other. The linguistics is also the fact that we communicate a lot by language. So what we say both externally or in our head, because I didn't go around going, I'm not good enough, I'm not capable enough. I didn't go around saying that, but it was the pattern running in my head, the program, if you want to put it that way. And for me, I think of NLP like having the software manual for your mind and your brain. And when you then start looking at the patterns, the strategies, the triggers and the anchors, you can then do something to change them, because you can sit down and do a strategy elicitation and you can find out how and why do you do the thing you do. You can look at where the pattern, the strategy is not working, and you can fix it and change it and adjust it. Or you can anchor yourself into completely different states and ways of being. Seriously, the NLP folders are behind me. They're like that thick. There is just so much that packs into NLP. But for me, it was really not just understanding now more about what my mind does and how I think and how I process and how I learn and my values, my beliefs, and how that impacts the way I move through the world. It was just like, okay, because sometimes people can tell you chapter and verse what the problem is in terms of how they think, how they feel, the way they act, what they're doing, their self-talk. That doesn't solve the problem necessarily. Mm-hmm. So where the NLP then came into its own, not only was it laying this out for me almost in black and white and putting it on the table, now there's some technique, there's a shed load of techniques and processes you can use to change those things. And one of the things I loved was the fact that it was fast. And fast doesn't mean like fast food. It was deep, because once I'd sorted out the fear of public speaking, for example, I've been gassing all over the world ever since. I didn't have to keep going back and I'm working on it and papering over the cracks. I'm like, no, let's just do this thing now and let me change and rewire my brain.
And what isn't it? Because a lot of people have some preconceptions about NLP. What isn't it?
It is, for me personally, it is not manipulation. Let me put it this way. Now, this is not a hammer, but it's probably the same kind of weight. Let's just assume that this is NLP and it was a hammer. I could use this to build a house for a homeless family.
Of course.
Or I could use this to clock somebody over the head. It's not the fault of this, it's who's wielding it. So I think the same can be said for anything. If used in the wrong, now there's a guy called Chris Voss. I came across him last year when I did his masterclass, and I came across him a few weeks ago. He's now on this thing called Clubhouse. For those of you who don't know what Clubhouse is, don't worry about it. If you do, see you there. Chris Voss is a hostage negotiator. So you know those times when we saw those sieges in the 1980s, where the SAS, etc., was storming the buildings and going through the glass and all that sort of stuff? Chris Voss is one of the men who'll be on that phone negotiating. I did his masterclass. I would say at least 90% of the masterclass was NLP. I'm not kidding you. And I was like, whoa. And it just showed me the power. Even though NLP, people are sometimes a little bit snobby about it, when you really look at how many, because I was in a Clubhouse room recently, and I'm not going to say what they were talking about, but one guy was saying this thing that he'd learned, a process. And I said, oh yeah, that's NLP, strategy list anchoring, whatever it was. And he went, oh really? Because he'd been working with a coach who hadn't told him it was NLP, but he's listing out all this great new thing that he'd done. I'm like, dude, Richard Bandler and whatever, they came up with that eons ago. So seriously, so yes, sometimes people think it's manipulative. I'm just saying it depends whose hands it's in. And when it is in the right hands, it is something that has the power and potential and possibility to absolutely change lives and minds rapidly, deeply, and forever.
Yeah, I'm glad you finished off with that as well, because I remember, I think I did my NLP practitioner in around, I think 2008 or thereabouts with Topher Morrison. And the reason why I did it then was, say again?
I trained with Topher as well. Sorry, carry on.
Yeah, so the reason why I did it then was on the back end of, like I said, my first event was with Tony Robbins, and that weekend opened up so much about myself. I'm like, whoa, I can see that in me, and whoa, this is, do you know what I mean? And then I went on this journey of finding out more and more about myself, and I went away and did the NLP simply because I wanted to understand me. Why did I feel, similar to what you're saying, why did I feel feelings of not being good enough? Why did I have feelings of self-loathing? Why did I think that, I couldn't go out and achieve things? All of a sudden I'm told about these limiting beliefs, so I'm trying to explore it more. So I went away and did that. And yeah, I think it was very powerful for me, because it helped me to start recognizing actually a lot of it starts here. And actually the words I use here determines how I feel about things and then the actions I take in the world. So I find it being very powerful. And I agree also, because a lot of people think it's manipulation and everything else. Similar to you, to me, it's a bit like money. Money in itself is not good or bad, right? It's what you do with the money. You can use the money to build schools. You can use the money to build hospitals. You can use the money to help the poor, or you can use money to go away and build and research better ways of killing people by building new guns and new machines and all this stuff. The money in itself has just no relevance to it, right? It's just depending what we bring to that situation. So continuing in the veins of NLP, in what ways, because you spoke about negotiation, which I think is great there, how could an everyday person potentially use some of the NLP techniques to be able to improve their negotiation position and also close sales, but like we said, not from a manipulative point of view, but from a point of view of adding value and helping people to achieve the outcomes that align with what they want to achieve?
One of the quick things, I can see the comments coming in. One of the quick things, for any parents watching, one of the favorite things you can do is almost in everyday language, you call it like a double bind. But you could say to your little ones, do you want to brush your teeth first or put on your pajamas?
I
And
love
you're
the
going to
double
choose
bind, by the
one.
way. I love using the double bind, by the way, with them. But carry on.
Oh, seriously, they'll then go, brush my teeth. You go, great. So you put your pajamas on when you finish. Okay. And seriously, and it feels like you've had a choice. And they're like, okay, now we're ready for bed. So I'll tell you, there's one, that's one of my favorite ones that I share with parents. And they go away and do it and they come back laughing. They're like, that was so cool. In terms of sales, one of the things about when I first did NLP, and I trained with a guy, and I remember he was one of the first people who said it to me, a guy called Tad James. And he said to sell is to serve, because he was talking about the original meaning of the word. And I learned this on my NLP training. I was like, oh, that's so interesting. Because oftentimes when I used to think of sales, thought of, sorry, no offense to car salesmen, I'm sure you're all lovely. But I used to think of the television movie Car Salesman, trying to sell you an old banger that was only going to drive for 500 miles. And then you say, oh, well, I'm sorry, it's out of warranty.
Sounds like one way.
Seriously. And I thought, oh my God. So I started to think, to sell is to serve. And if you have something of value, now when you're into sales, it's not trying to push it onto someone that doesn't want it. We come back to, and actually, to be honest with you, the first time I heard the whole thing about value proposition was from Philip Kotler when I did my business degree. He's a marketing guru, for those of you who might be a little bit old school. However, when I did my NLP training, they were talking about values elicitation. What is important to someone? Because when you know what their highest values are, number one, you can then start to, Kotler used to say, find the need and fill it. So you now start to understand how they see the world and can you also add something of value to them? Then when you see what the problems and challenges are, you can now communicate how you can add value to those challenges in terms of resolving them. And also in terms of the whole piece around communication and communicating with people. And this is one of the, and this crosses over to what I'm doing when I'm teaching the photo reading as well. You understand someone's learning style, communication style. So if you are speaking to someone, let's say, who is visual, and you're coming in with analysis and detail, they're just going to be glazing over. Whereas if there's somebody who really wants the analysis and detail, and you're painting linguistic pretty pictures, again, they're going to be glazing over. So it was this whole thing. One of the things, if you've ever studied NLP or if you go to look it up, you're going to see a word called rapport. That's one of the first things that you're taught, because when you can now get into rapport with the people that you're speaking to, they say people who like each other. Yep. It doesn't mean you have to be best buddies to buy something from someone, but there is some sort of synergy between you, and you can do that very quickly and very seamlessly with NLP, so that you are on the same level as someone. You're literally speaking the same language. You're listening at what their values are. You're making an evaluation. Do I genuinely believe that I could help fulfill on that? And if I can, now I can show you all of the ways that I can do that, so that now you're building up the value proposition. So for me, I see it like that, rather than trying to use clever linguistic games to push someone into a corner to do something they don't want to do. Because from my marketing days and when I did A-level psychology, I know about cognitive dissonance, buyer's remorse, and all of those things. If you manipulate someone into something they do not want or need, it's not going to last very long, and all of that will kick in. Whereas if you've genuinely been able to get on a vibe with that person and really get a sense of what will be required and what you can do and how you can bring value, it's a whole different ballgame. People go away happy and just bouncing off the walls.
I mean, that's I'm glad you also shared that, because it's something that I always say is so much more important in today's age. In the days before, we used to do a lot of our interactions and shopping online. The door-to-door salesman could get away with, giving you all the spill, selling you a dud, and going around the corner, you can't see them. But now we live in a world where actually, you know what, it's in everybody's best interest to make sure you're adding value. Why? Because people will go online and comment, hey, actually, you know what, great service, awesome, highly recommend. Or actually, you know what, it's a dud, stay away from them, all that type of stuff. So that short-term thinking really does not serve anybody. And that's why it's very much important, as you said, that actually we take the time out to actually understand what's the problem point. What are kind of some of the solutions which might be ideal in this situation? Is there some form of alignment, so that a person can go away thinking, actually, you know what, I just got sold something. Here's the interesting thing as well that I've been finding out. People are prepared to pay whatever they are prepared to pay for whatever they feel is of value to them. Just like you said, you spent $2,000 on a course which you thought was just about communication to help you become a better communicator, right? For some people, be like, why would I spend £2,000 on a thingy? Because maybe communication isn't your need at that moment in time. But for you, it's like, well, if this is going to change my life, then I'll pay that money. I'm happy to pay the money. And it sounded like you'd even look at the details first, Neva, to actually find out exactly what was being sold. You're just like, yeah, I want to have this space. I want to be over there. So sell me it. And
absolutely. Like, seriously, I'm like, how did that even happen? Now, the guy who sold me was a lovely guy called Paul Vernon, who's very, very skilled NLP trainer. But he was absolutely right, because he saw in me what I didn't even see myself.
Got it.
And seriously, I cannot imagine what my life, I mean, to be honest with you, I might not even be here in terms of what I was contemplating in September 2000, but let's assume I was. I can't imagine what my life will be like without these skills, without the photo reading and all of those things. I can't even begin. I don't even want to imagine. I could, but I don't want to.
Let's talk about photo reading. So I'm one of those people who has lots of books that he's read, but also has a lot of books that he hasn't read. And actually, as I get more and more books that I need to read, and I look at what I haven't read, it's like my list of books that need to be read just goes up. However, you said something earlier on, which was, and correct me if I'm wrong, 25,000 words in, what did you say?
Per minute.
Pardon?
Per minute.
Per minute. Wow, that's like a computer. How does that work? What's that about?
The way that it works, it's tapping into what we can already naturally do. Have you seen the movie Limitless with Bradley Cooper and Robert De Niro?
That's not the one where they put the pills, is it?
Yeah.
Okay. Yes.
So I would say it, and the reason I say this is a few years ago, I had a medical doctor. He was studying to be a neurosurgeon. He came on the photo reading workshop and he said to me, Marilyn, have you seen the movie Limitless? This was just on the Friday, because we do Friday afternoon, then Saturday, all day Saturday and Sunday. And I said, no, I haven't seen it. Why? And he said, everything you're teaching in this workshop is in the movie. The only difference is we don't need to take a dangerous silver pill. And I thought, oh, that's interesting. So we don't, I know. And then he said, the only thing you're not doing is time shifting. And I was like, all right, then. He comes back on the Sunday afternoon. He says, I take that back. I said, what? His name is Dr. Koss. And he said, we are time shifting, because he couldn't believe how much we'd covered, how much people have changed, and how much people have learned. Now, to put those numbers into context, the average person maybe reads 200 or 300 words per minute. If you're really pushing it and you're a speed reader, you might be doing 500 to 600 words per minute. But with photo reading, we start at 25,000 words per minute, because we are using the part of your brain that can already do that. You can go into a room and you can scan the room in a nanosecond. And if somebody really questioned you, you'll be able to tell them some of the things that are in the room, even though you weren't going, there's this and there's this and there's this, and because we're out, we just go boom. So we're using that part of the brain that is expansive, can take things in a fraction of a second, and we're using the brain with more direction, more of a sense of purpose. So these words aren't random as they're coming at you. You've already, there are 5 steps. And in the step 1, you're activating part of the brain that I learned about when I did NLP. They call it the RAS, Reticular Activating System. Tell that part of your brain what it is you want it to find for you, and it will do it. And so that is what photo reading is centered around, having a clear sense of purpose, refocusing the brain, activating what we call left and right brain. So you're now not struggling to take it all in and really concentrate hard. It's accelerated learning. It's expansive. You're using your left and your right brain, which means you have more capacity to take all of this information inside. So I know it sounds like it does sound like a Hollywood movie, and it is like a Hollywood movie, but it's fast, it's easy. People learn it in 2.5 days. They come in one end with dyslexia, dyspraxia, and all sorts of stuff. They go out the other end flying. And I've had students who will go from failing exams to passing their exams in the space of a few weeks, and adults who are entrepreneurs and business owners doing exactly what you said, which is getting more done in less time. And and I show the quote occasionally on Facebook, lovely entrepreneur called Naomi Tamayama. A few years ago, I saw a post on her Facebook page saying, I've just photo read 8 books in 1 hour and written a piece of work for, and you're like, what? 8 books in 1 hour, and she's done a piece of work from it. I'm telling you, it's crazy cool stuff. It's amazing.
One of the things I really enjoy about doing this show is I get to learn a lot, and I have to say that you've inspired me, and I'm definitely going to be signing up for photo reading. So I've done speed reading, right? And I can utilize speed reading, but this thought of actually, being able to read so many of those books, but also to retain that information. To me, it's just like, wow, imagine how much more information you can take on with less stress very quickly. Pick up a book. Okay, cool, done. Yeah. What's the questions, right? I mean,
no, seriously, it is. And you said the key word, retention. I've got no, because, you know, some of you may have heard of Paul McKenna, and those of you in the chat,
sure.
really pleased that you're here. If you've heard of Paul McKenna, just you can type a yes into the chat. There's a thing in the photo, oh, I've got it here, the thing in the photo reading book where Paul McKenna is reading at speeds of up to 1 million words per minute. Then they do a comprehension test. They're scoring over 75%. So it goes beyond mere random chance. So when I say 25,000 words per minute, that's pretty slow. Now, to do it the million, you can't turn the pages that fast. You need kind of supercomputer assistance. But seriously, there was one woman, I'll share the picture later, Addy, I'll tag you in on it.
Sure.
She was doing her teacher training exams, and when she came to the photo reading, she was thinking of giving up because it was just too hard. And she said to the group, she said, if any of you suffer from insomnia, I've got the thing for you, and pulled out this massive book and says, this will put you to sleep every time. And she hated that book. By the Sunday afternoon, I'm doing something at the front of the room, and I heard her, and she says, now, where's my little Bible? And I thought, let me just see what she reaches for. So now I'm watching from the side of my eye. My girl reached for the book that she hated 2 days before. And she was beaming. And I said, hold it right there. I said, that is a Kodak moment. So I said, don't move. And I said, actually, the only thing I want you to do, rather than holding the book face on, I want you to hold it sideways so we see how thick it is. And she's beaming this smile. And seriously, the first time I had this experience, a guy phoned me up. He was a police officer, Bobby on the beat. He wanted to be a police sergeant, had failed his exam. I think it was either 2 or 3 years in a row. His bosses had said to him in no uncertain terms, maybe you are not sergeant's material.
Right, okay, fine.
You've got the younger guys coming up through the ranks. Maybe this just isn't for you. So if you don't pass this year, so he had made the decision, if he didn't pass, which seemed unlikely given all the previous failures, he was going to give up being in the police force and go and do personal security and basically be a bouncer in a nightclub.
Right,
because
okay.
He didn't want to walk the beat anymore. He phoned me up. I didn't have a work sort of schedule, but I said, yeah, I do one-to-one coaching as well for photo reading. And he said, I can't do much, haven't got much time. I'm on a budget. He said, the most I can do is probably 1.5 hours, 2 hours. And I said, when's your exam? He said, in 4 weeks. I went, no problem. He went, but I'm busy for the next 3 weeks. I'm like, okay, now we're cutting it fine. So he comes, he's with me for a couple of hours, off he goes. Get a phone call from him after the exam, and he says, Marilyn, he said, I've got no idea if I passed, but because he's an adult, he said, for the first time in my life, I took an exam and I know I can do exams. He just sailed, just felt calm, relaxed. I then get a phone call a couple of weeks later. He said, I got my results. He said, not only did I pass, I was in the top 25 percentile for the entire country. Wow. This is a man who was about to give up the job he'd been doing since he was 16, 17 years old to go and be a Bobby on the beat, all because he couldn't quite get it together in terms of how to assimilate the information and reproduce it in the way that he needed to. So it's been life-changing. I do not say that lightly.
Wow. I mean, yes, we get a mess. Thank you very much for that, because you've just really helped me to even, expand my understanding of photo reading, but also what it means in terms of outcomes in my personal life. I mean, just hearing you speak there has helped me say, actually, you know what? I can learn a lot more quicker. I can do it with less stress. I'm already stuck for time. And so it means that actually I can get this done a lot quicker, achieve the outcomes a lot quicker with a lot more confidence in significantly less time. Time is one of my key value needs at this moment in time. How do I get a lot more done in a short amount of time? So for me, that's just like a wow. And it's just, so I'm definitely going to be.
And I'm telling you, Addy, this is the absolute honest truth. There is video evidence of this. Well, people don't know the backstory. Last August, I was going to be doing now I'm the MC for an event that happens in London every year. It's called the TCCHE, the Conference for Consciousness and Human Evolution. So you've got people like Greg Braden, Dr. Bruce Lipton, Lynn McTaggart, Nassim Haramein, Dr. Joe Dispenza, you name it, all of the big names from science and spirituality are there. The very first time I was emceeing the event, I knew I was going to be doing all the interviews. They told me they had prepared questions. So I'm just going to be there delivering the questions. They're going to film all of these guys, Greg, Braden, etc., answering. No problem. Fabulous. I woke up at 3 o'clock in the morning on the day I'm going to be doing it, the Friday, and I was like, oh my God, what if there aren't any questions? I've never worked with these people before. So now I switch on the light and there's like 10 speakers. I'm like, okay, so let's see. I wrote down some questions for Bruce Lipton. Then I got myself back into state. Then I wrote down some questions for Greg Braden. Then I wrote down some questions for Neil McTaggart. Then I wrote down some questions for doctors JJ and Desiree Hurtak. Then I wrote down, and Dr. Joe Dispenza. And I'm just writing all these questions on little white cards and went back to sleep. So now I get to the event and I'm asking my questions. And when we did the standard questions for a couple of people, I said, oh, I've got a couple of extra questions. Do you want to, can I ask you those as well? A few of them leaned into me. Now, these people are being interviewed across the globe. And they said, those are some of the best questions I've ever been asked. Thank you so much. So now I'm on stage and we're going to do an audience Q&A. I'm just about to walk on stage and Richard, who runs the whole event, he taps me and he said, Marilyn, we've changed our mind. We're not going to do audience Q&A. Can you just ask the questions for the speakers? So I went, give me a minute. So I turn around, run to the back of the room and I get the little cards that I kind of channeled, having photo read their bios that morning. I'm partway through and I've just spoken to Greg Braden and I'm now on to Bruce Lipton. I said, oh, Bruce, let me get your questions. And Bruce says, do you have questions for all of us? I went, yeah. And he went, what specific questions? I went, yeah. So I'm just about to read the question and Greg Braden interrupts in front of 550 people. He says, Marilyn, where did you get these questions from? Now my heart's racing because I'm like, oh my God, if I say I made them up this morning and he doesn't like them and they want audience Q&A, this is going to be one of the major embarrassments of my career. So I took a breath. I said, well, to be honest with you, Greg, I made him up I made him up at 3 o'clock this morning. And he just said, beautiful question. And just sat there the whole time and just smiled at me the entire time. Wow. And last year, live on camera, I was interviewing Nassim Haramein. Oh my gosh, if I read you his bio, it will blow your mind.
Please do. We're here.
Seriously, I'll see if I can pull it up because I've got it on my computer somewhere. And right, seriously, CERN, splitting atoms and particles, quantum physics, you name it, this man is doing it. I think I knew I was going to be interviewing him. It was meant to be a workshop. And then just a few hours before, they said, oh, by the way, there's been a change of a plan with Nassim. You're going to interview him. He's not going to do a workshop because he was supposed to run a workshop. And then I come in and field the audience questions and throw a question in. So now I've got an hour and a half live on camera with Nassim Haramein. And I've got to come up with the questions. I'm like, how does one keep a quantum physicist entertained? People were messaging me and go, oh, Marilyn, don't know where you got those questions from, but they were incredible. You know where I got the questions from? Photo reading. Wow. In terms of have to now go and quickly assimilate some knowledge on this topic so that, and somebody else sent me a message saying, I'm so impressed that you managed to hold your own with a brain like Nassim Haramein. And I'm like, thank you, photo reading. You have saved my behind yet again.
Awesome. I mean, I really appreciate it. Thank you once again for sharing that. I mean, that's just really driven it home. Having listened to some of Nassim's work, I mean, that guy is just, for me, he's off the hook. In terms of metaphysics, atoms, like you said, and all of that stuff, the way, and also the way he presents it in such a way which is easily palatable for somebody like me. So if he was able to sit down and really, you know, at a mental level, engage him, then yeah, hat off to you. So I'm definitely up for it. And then what I'm going to do is afterwards as well, so if you give me a link to your photo reading, I will place it underneath these video recordings. So anybody else out there, we're getting some comments of wow. And Pura talked about it works. 100 MO is her record. Also got a question that we're going to come into in a shortly as well. So there's lots of people already like, wow. And I'm sure can also see the possibilities or what this means in their life. And that's a great thing. I think what you've given there, and I thank you very much for that value add, is something practical that people can go away, make a decision about, take part in it, and then also see how that plays out in their life and what opportunities are open. So I do have a question here, which says, does photo reading have anything to do with meditation?
Wow, kind of yes. What it starts with, because we have different audiences coming. So somebody's coming just for like a Huna workshop. They come into the room, their eyes are already closed. Like, okay, man, do this.
I know what Huna is. I know what Huna is. What's Huna?
For those of you listening, H-U-N-A. It's an ancient Hawaiian healing methodology. So when I'm working with, let's say, a client out in Australia or America, and I'm doing energy clearing work, I tend to use Huna because I can do something sitting here in London, a client in Australia will feel it even if they got no idea what I'm doing. And when I say no idea what I'm doing, they're not even on the thing with me. I'm just thinking about them and going, I don't think so-and-so's feeling good today. Let me just send them some Huna. They'll email me and go, did you do some Huna today? I go, why are you asking? They will feel it. So it's energy clearing. So it works with the breath. It works with symbols.
Okay.
You might have heard of Ho'oponopono.
Yeah, that was I forgot that guy's name. Is that I love you, please forgive me, thank you?
Yes and no. I'd say that's the social media version of Ho'oponopono. When I went out to Hawaii to study, Ho'oponopono in its fullest sense involves the stage, the Avaiku, the Arca connections, the working with the higher self. So it's a big old production in your mind. But the I'm sorry, I love you, please forgive me, thank you, I call that the social media version of what Dr. Hugh Len was talking about in terms of the forgiveness. And it's a great way to start, but I use Ho'oponopono if clients want to cut emotional ties and connections, let go of old situations. And it is a process which you work with the Huna guides, etc.
Sure.
So if I'm doing that, people come expecting relaxation meditation. When people come for photo reading, I have age 7 to 70 plus, sometimes in the same room. And a lot of people come from business, they're academics, so accountants, marketers, business owners, school teachers, and coaches, therapists, consultants, etc. But they're not all there for the same reason. Many come with the mistaken belief they're just going to learn to read faster. Little do they know that it's going to change their whole world and rock their world in all areas. So I don't call it meditation. I say we do closed eye processes. And the reason we do those is you want to get yourself into what we call the accelerated learning state, where we're in a state of relaxed alertness. So even though you're reading and learning and assimilating at speed, we do that from a place of ease, and we do that from a place of relaxation. Now, for those of you who are spiritually minded, because I had a friend of mine come to the photo reading workshop a few years ago. Now, he said what people always say. His words were, I wish I came to this when you told me about it 5 or 6 years ago. I've had people get angry with me saying, why didn't you tell me it was this? If I'd known it was this, I would have come years ago. He said, because he's a spiritual mentor. We just did we do 4 hours on the Friday night. He came to me at the end of it. He said, Marilyn, I've got my money's worth. I don't even need to come back, because he'd been trying to work on reaching higher states of consciousness. In step 1, which is called the Tangerine Technique, just with step 1 on the Friday night, he was reaching higher states of consciousness just like that, over and over and over again at will. Because for those of you who work with chakras, the Tangerine Technique is about putting the tangerine above and behind your head. But what it's doing from an esoteric point of view, that is the space above your crown chakra. So people often have a deep meditative experience. And I had a guy who was a maths teacher. He's doing a PhD in maths. And I said to him, what's the most relaxing thing you do? Because we were doing the transformation program. And he said, photo reading. And I went, he's obviously misheard me, because he does martial arts and all sorts of things. And I said, no. What's the most relaxed? How do you relax? What's the most relaxing? And he, likes riding his bike. He said, photo reading, because it centers around that state of relaxed alertness. And you read and you produce and you speak and you teach and you learn and you take your exams, for those of you who are studying, from that state. And as somebody described it, you're gliding. Because when I did my NLP trainers training exam, I didn't revise in the traditional sense. I just photo read, did a few mind maps, Bob's your uncle. And I put a goal in my timeline that I was going to be finished the 8-hour exam in 3 hours flat. And so I just photo read. I get to the hotel. It was the Hilton Hotel, Kensington Olympia. I walk into the hotel. Somebody looks at me and says, Marilyn, how do you do a submodalities belief change? I looked at them. They looked at me. I just burst into tears, because I'm like, oh crap, I've just spent £4,500 on trainers training, which is a 3-week training. And this is the final furlong now. I've made it through all of the trainings, all of the practical, all the final big thing is the 1-day closed book written exam. I burst into tears, so I didn't know. So I'm in the toilet doing what I call the Oprah Ugly Cry. A friend of mine walks in, Denise, and she says, are you all right? And I said, oh my God, I didn't revise. I just photo read, and I've only just learned how to photo read. I don't really know how to photo read, and I'm crying. And then I get into the exam room, so they, take all your bags away and stuff, and I'm crying. And I'm like, look, I could sit here all day and cry, which would probably be really annoying for everyone else who's here. Or I can beat myself up for how foolish I was not to have studied properly, as in tried to cram every single word, or I could do at home what I've been doing, which is to get myself into state, be open and be in flow, because we're working from the flow state. I finished that exam 3 hours on the money, to the point where they thought I had cheated, because when they looked at my paper, they said it looked like reading the textbook. And they're like, how did she finish in 3 hours? Because a few weeks before, when I did my practitioner test, it was one of the worst tests they'd ever seen. And I did that at home, open book. And because I didn't mention that I was diagnosed with what was thought to be early onset Alzheimer's in my 20s. So I was still struggling with the aftermath of that. And in the space of a few months, I went from worst in class, and actually a space of 3 weeks, because when I went back and did my master practitioner, having decided to put the photo reading into practice rather than leaving, I had tapes back then. I went from worst test in the class to the only person out of what, 65, 70 people who had no corrections. That was in 3 weeks, even with my Alzheimer's brain. It was seriously, when I say it was life-changing, and it still to this day shows up and blows my mind in the most exciting of ways, I'm not kidding you. And for the person who said thank you for answering my question, you're most welcome.
Yeah, that's from Lenique Lewis. So thanks, Lenique, for joining in and for participating. Really appreciate your support all the time. I mean, that's just a powerful testimony. I think, I doubt there's going to be that many people, if any, who are going to hear what photo reading can do, who are not going to be interested in having that in their life. And it's interesting in your, whilst you were sharing there, I know you use a number of terms there, technical terms there. You mentioned something about tapes. So for the millennials who are listening, what are tapes?
Hold up.
Yeah, I remember those days. Yeah, you used to go. Yeah, oh wow, cassettes. Wow. So millennials are very good. What's that?
Back then.
That fits into the cloud. The cloud, like whoa.
I know. And I've kept them. Of course, I don't listen to anymore. I kept them for. And actually, you said something that made me smile as well. This is one of my favorite quotes. Now, I bought this, and I know when I bought it was in 1995. You talked about the whole thing about difficulty, challenges, etc. I bought this during some of my darkest times, and it's a quote from Albert Einstein, who is also on the front of the photo reading books. Cool. And it says, in the middle of difficulty lies opportunity. I didn't know what it really meant in 1995, but it gave me hope that with the difficult time I was going through, there must be an opportunity there. And now this is almost like the cornerstone of my life. If people are struggling. And with regards to the photo reading, it was one of those things that had I not been so desperate, number one, I was desperate and I still didn't take it on board. I bought the tapes, it cost me several £100s, left them sitting on the shelf, which is where I term the phrase shelf development. And it wasn't until I was on the NLP training, and the guy who was running the training, somebody said, how do you remember all this stuff? Names, dates, facts, figures, places. And he said, I read 20 to 30 books a month. Here's me now, obviously doesn't get out much. And then somebody said, how do you read that many books a month? And he said, I photo read. And he pointed to the resource table at the back of the room because they had things for sale. And I'm like, I've got those tapes at home. And that was the moment where the penny dropped. And I'm like, you know what? I struggled so badly with the test, and it was open book. I was doing it at home, couldn't hack it. I said, after I decided I was going to come back 3 weeks later and do the master practitioner, I decided I was going to listen to every single tape with an open mind, rather than thinking I know best because I've got a degree, and just do it with an open mind, do everything I was told, put it into practice. I went back 3 weeks later. I went from the worst test in the class to the best test in the class. 3 weeks, hands down. And that's when I knew there's something in this photo reading goes beyond random chance. Wow. And people can learn from home. For anyone who's thinking we're in lockdown, it's like, it don't matter. It's online. It's a full 3-day workshop available online. And people say it feels as though they are in the room. So, it's there.
Wow. I mean, yeah, I know I'm saying this again, and especially since we're in lockdown, a lot of people have time. And I know a lot of people may be dealing with some real challenges and uncertainties. Some people that I speak to, some of their biggest fears are about how will the world turn back to normal? When will they get back to normal living? And I guess I usually say to them that actually we need to start redefining what normal looks like, because actually the normal that we used to hold on to won't be normal moving forward. The new norm is actually what we're into right now. And I guess what you've given, in my mind, is giving people a real something practical that they can hold on to in this time of being at home. Why not spend 3 days learning something which can then catapult you before, I think Boris is saying schools open on March 8th, and then in April, some of the other stuff. So we've got about another 2-3 months based on what they're currently telling us, because that could change. Why not utilize that time and come out all guns blazing with a new skill set, with a new mind, being able to, 30 books a month? Wow. That alone is just like, oh my gosh, think how much information you have. Think how many opportunities that opens up, especially in this knowledge age. We've got a few questions or comments coming in. So Ampora asked, do you have a functional player? Yeah, that's a good question. I don't even know what they look like anymore.
I have. I've got, this is, like the old stack where you had your tape deck, your CD deck, I still got
one of that.
Because when I was a hypnotherapist, I used to do tapes for people. The handheld ones where you pull out the little handle. And
you made one for me, if you remember. You made me one once.
Oh my God, yes.
Yes, you did.
That's what I used to do.
Yes, you did. You made me one, and that was one of. So I thank you again. That was one of the. I was still in my early journeys, and that was one of the building blocks, because it helped me to also start listening to those things, and like you said, start going through that reprogramming of the mind. And I had a lot to reprogram in my mind. There's also something else that you did once, which also stays with me today. I remember at the Yes Group. So big shout out to the Yes Group. I mentioned the Yes Group with Mac as well the other day. The great thing about the Yes Group and the personal development environment, and I've never shared this before live, but I'm going to share it as well, was up until I started doing that personal development, I was in a world which was specifically around my race, i.e. black people. Obviously, there's other races, but my interactions weren't necessary to that extent with other races. Then I did UPW, and I'm seeing this place full of, people from all different races being nice to each other and cuddling each other and giving hugs and stuff. You're thinking like, wow, this is crazy, but okay, it feels good. Then I joined the Yes Group. Then you meet people from all different racial backgrounds and everything else. And it's like, okay, we've all got the same challenges and people helping people. And it's just like, oh my gosh, wow, you mean this is what the world could really be like, where people actually genuinely love each other, not because of race and everything. But I remember one time at one of the Yes Groups, you did a session on stage. I think you called it the Bag Lady, and you came on with your rucksacks in your back and your pulling trolleys, and you came on and you used it as a demonstration that we've all got baggage. For some reason, I've always associated it, and it's kind of anchored to Erica Badu's Bag Lady. I love that played that track that day, right? But yeah, and even now, see, whenever I talk about baggage, and I don't know if you had a chance to watch the podcast we did the other day, which is Brothers Keeper with Freddie and Davis, when we was talking about luggage. In my mind, I was thinking about you and that whole thing, because anytime I think about baggage, I think about that. That was such a very key kind of driving point, and that was my first exposure to baggage. Like, oh my gosh, man, I got a whole heap of luggage, man. What's going on here? No wonder it's all on top.
That was so long ago. Oh my God, that was so long ago. But the reason I did it, you can talk about these things, but I thought, the way I can make an impact and show people what I mean. And somebody came to me and they said, Marilyn, I know you're a very busy lady. I thought you were going to be heading to another event, which is why you brought all your luggage on stage. It wasn't until I then started demonstrating.
Okay, what's this about now? Like, where's she going?
Oh my gosh, that is, oh my God. Seriously, that's got, I don't even know now. I don't even, I know Carl Pearsall, the
Carl,
creator of Yes Group. I don't know if he has records of when we did what, but my God, he's probably the only one who could really say with certainty. That was, seriously, that was one of my very first Yes Group talks, if not the first one. Amazing.
Yeah, and when you said you wanted to have an impact, up until now it still has an impact, because it really helped me to drive that home. And sometimes, when I meet people, I'm aware of the baggage that I carry also, and sometimes it allows me to be a little bit more compassionate to understand that people have baggage. So I really appreciate that. So just as we start to wrap up, now I spoke there a bit about race and some of my journeys to actually recognize that it's not necessarily, it wasn't in my best interest to just, what's the word I'm looking for? Reduce my circle to people who look like me. That made sense in me expanding that. And it, because of my social circumstances, my limiting, actually, let me rephrase that. Because of my limiting beliefs before, I'd allowed myself to be in environments which were limited in those areas. But as I grew beyond that and expanded those areas, I've been fortunate to meet people from so many different racial backgrounds who've been blessings in my life. My question to this is this to you. In your work, do you face racism and or sexism? And if so, how do you go about dealing with that and still remaining positive in a positive space?
As soon as you started talking, I thought of the one I often share. Like I do a lot of I've done some kind of working with gang resolution and conflict resolution and all that sort of stuff. And of course, talking about race, racism, inclusion, etc. And I often share a story of something that happened to me when I first became a coach and a therapist. And this was in the days where we didn't have Facebook and all the rest. But I did have a website, but my picture wasn't on the website. And I do have a brochure, the same one that is in the corner there, if you can see it, same brochure. But my picture isn't on the brochure. So people would make a decision to come and see me based on the information I said. Do you want to let go of negative emotions, limiting beliefs, turn your life around in a matter of hours rather than days, weeks, months and years, and, reclaim your life and all the rest of it? So a woman comes in for a session and I can tell she's uncomfortable. Now, when you're seeing a therapist for the first time, it makes sense. You might not be thinking woohoo, but I knew there was something else going on. This went beyond the usual bit uncomfortable. So eventually, about half an hour in, and we're there for a whole day. We're doing a one-day breakthrough session. I said to her, is there something you need to say such that when you say it, you will feel more comfortable? She said, yes, there is. I said, what is it? She said, if I'd known you were black, I wouldn't have booked the session and come to see you, because my dad is very racist, my mum is racist, and I'm racist. I said, thank you so much for sharing and being so honest and open. I said, we've got a couple of options here. I says, normally, having hired the room, etc., I wouldn't normally give a refund. You're here now, the day's booked out. I says, look, it's up to you. I can give you a refund, full refund, no harm, no foul, or you can stay and do the work that you booked in to do. She decided to stay and do the work. So we do the one-day breakthrough session, have a great time. Now, this was in the summer. A few months later, I get a letter through the post, and I didn't recognize the handwriting. So who's this from? I could tell it was a Christmas card. So I open it, and I went to the right side first, and I'm reading it. Dear Marilyn, hope you have a wonderful Christmas. And she said her name. I was like, who the heck is that? And then I noticed on the other side of the card, there was like full of writing, and there was a letter inside as well. It was from this client. Completely turned her life around as a result of that one day. She's no longer drinking, no longer self-harming, no longer bulimic, no longer anorexic. She's back at university doing very well. And she said, thank you for helping to save my life. In that moment, I realized the power of human connection. And if I can get in a room with you and we can have a few hours together, you could be a man from Mars. I don't really mind. We will find a way to break bread together. And I've done that with groups of people who have been fighting for years, to the point where even the police said they're not coming. And they said to me, you will need personal security, and you're probably going to need some bulletproof and stab-proof vests. I went, no, I'm not. I'm going to turn up just in my outfit, and in 3.5 hours, I'm going to have these people breaking bread. That's exactly what happened. Because for me, how can I say this? I'm going to see beyond our little human foibles, because I know what I'm there to do. And if you give me the opportunity and your mind is open just a tiny little bit and you let me get a little foot in that door, it's game, set and match. We're going to do this thing. But she was a defining moment, because I said, look, if I let race get in the way of this moment, I've no idea what would have happened to her. But the trajectory she was on, she was not going to last very long with all the things she was doing. And the fact that a few months later, she would write to me and say that, I'm like, I'm not going to let race get in my way. If I'm there to do a job, I'm going to do the job to the best of my ability. If you want to work with me, it's going to be more fun for you. If you don't, we're still going to get the outcome and the result. You're just going to catch up. And again, when you talk about the sexism, yeah, I turned up on site, and people have been openly hostile. And I remember one guy, and at the beginning of the corporate training, why are you here? What would you like to get from today? My manager sent me and said there were free biscuits. That's how he said it. I'm like, okay. I wrote it on the flip chart. I'm like, thank you very much. Just wrote it on the flip chart. At the end of the day, who comes sidling up to me to say, oh, Marilyn, I'm very sorry for the way I behaved this morning. That was one of the best workshops I've ever been on. I'm so glad I came. So I don't let those things get in my way. I'm like, I know what job I'm there to do. You can either join in with me or just stand aside and let me get on and do it. And the very first time my very first time out as a management consultant, I was in HM Treasury Department, Horse Guards Road. I'm sitting there, I'm suited and booted. I'm wearing my Sarah Sturgeon suit, my Prada shoes. I've got my leather bridge briefcase. I look the part. Let's not make any mistakes here. You have to be collected. It's a secure building. It's a government department. So people come down and collect the person and off they go. And I'm not really thinking anything of it. And I just see a guy, like loads of people, came down, spoke to a few people, and then they turned to go back to reception. And in that moment, I was like, oh my gosh. He spoke to every white woman in reception. The only person because he knew I was a woman, we'd spoken on the phone, only person he didn't speak to was me. So I call his name out as he's walking back to reception. He turns around and looks around like, who called me? And I said, oh, are you da 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 da? And he went, yes. And I said, oh, hello, I'm Marilyn Devonish, the management consultant. I'm here to design the team building and away day event for you. We both know what happened there. It did not occur to him that the management consultant was black. Now I'm in a panic because we're getting to I don't know if they still got the glass elevator, but we're getting to the glass lift. And now I'm like, oh my God, he didn't even think to speak to me. And I'm a black girl from South London with dreadlocks. And the Deputy Prime Minister had walked past me when I was going into the building. So I knew this was kind of high profile stuff. And I'm like, oh my God, I've got no right being here. What am I think I'm doing? Thankfully, the other part of my brain, I call it my other brain, kicked right in and said, listen, yes, he might have been to Oxford, Cambridge, whatever, Harvard. Yes, he probably knows more about you than economics and fiscal policy. However, you are here because there's something he has not been able to do. His team is dysfunctional to the point where they're almost fighting. And you have the skill to turn that around. So listen here. You're going to be the best management consultant and corporate trainer he's ever seen. He's going to even forget that you're human. He's just going to be blown away by what you bring to the table. And the whole thing about, oh my God, it's a black woman. Forget that. That's going to go straight out of his head. That's exactly what happened. A week later, get a message from him after we did the event. The dysfunctional team member had come out for Friday night drinks and enjoyed it for the first time ever. That was a defining moment for me, because again, I'm like, I cannot let these things stand in my way, because I'm going to be flawed every single freaking time I walk into a building, and I cannot allow that to happen because I've got a job to do. That's a very long answer. I apologize, because you're probably looking at me to me that good for the love of stop talking.
I'm going to say thank you very much for sharing that, because I think in there you demonstrated the power that we have as individuals. For a lot of the time, I say that as I grow, I recognize that people are not racist in the sense that I used to think about it. They're inherently racist because they're bad people. People are sometimes may demonstrate racist behavior simply because of ignorance, because of the world that they've been grown up in, what they've seen, what they've exposed, their perception about things, their kind of view of the world, their internal view and external views of the world. And actually it takes sometimes through that interaction, and even though we may feel what we might term as a racist response or racist interaction, it's for us to rise above that and demonstrate, actually, you know what, we're human, and still give that person a chance. I mean, that story you gave about that lady, I'm glad that she even took up the offer. Maybe she was, well, actually you offered her a refund, so it didn't seem like there was anything forcing her to stay there, but I'm glad that she decided to. And I'm sure that left her with an impact and a difference about, actually, you know what? People are people. Human beings are human beings. Similarly with the guy that you went to, regardless of his position, that might just be him as a person anyway, just in general, right? But at the end of the day, you demonstrate, actually, you know what? You bring value. You're a human being. You do great stuff. And that also could have a big impact on him. I got a comment here from Amporo who said, we can transcend anything when we learn to see, hear, and speak through the heart and not the brain. That is full of misinformation and conditioning. 100% agree with that. And thank you so much for sharing your time with her. So, you know, yeah, I mean, what you shared has been really powerful. So thank you very much for that. Okay, so as we're now about to start wrapping up, got two more questions for you. First one. So what advice would you give to someone watching now who may have lost their job or business or might be going through whatever challenges, because there are many challenges during this kind of this challenging, uncertain times? What piece of advice would you give to them?
I so often hear in music, and the jukebox started as soon as you started talking. First song was Keep the Faith by Bon Jovi. and the other was You Are Not Alone by Michael Jackson. Let me expand a bit. The whole world on some level has been challenged. So please don't take it all on as a personal burden, because this is one of the time where there is solidarity and peace in numbers. Because sometimes, you know, if the whole world is doing well and you're the one person who's struggling,
Of course.
You're like, oh my gosh, it's me. Everything's on me. I must have done so. And I'm not saying there's not stuff that we do wrong, you know, and we could be doing better, more, etc. This is not one of those times. The whole world has been impacted. So this will be the one time where you maybe ease up on yourself a bit and realize you're not on your own. And one of the things, now I can hear another one of these sayings, it sounds a bit like a platitude, but this whole thing about this too shall pass, because one of the things I realized when I came through what was the worst period for me, where I actually contemplated suicide, I realized that I have survived everything that's been thrown at me. And trust me, my childhood was not easy. I was sexually abused from the age of 7 to 17. Many people would then say that, just that alone, never mind all the other stuff that has gone on in my life, would say that would be enough to mean that your life could not be happy and could not be full of joy and could not be fulfilled. And you would always feel less than and all the rest of it. I did for the first 32 years. I don't anymore. And so I realized that whatever's going on, I've always survived it. I've always been able to make it for another day. And so that's where the faith comes in. If your faith is one based on religion, then that's the thing that maybe you put more into. If your faith is based on spirituality, meditation, all of those things, then that's one of the things that you maybe start doing more. Because often when people are under pressure, they stop doing those small practices which make the difference. Now, when everything's good and everything's rolling fine, it's very easy for you to do your walk and do your exercise and do your meditation and do your daily gratitudes and whatever it is you're doing. It's when the rubber hits the road and things are challenging, that is the time where we need that more than ever. And if there are times where you just need to stay in bed that day and just rest, and not just rest your body, but rest your mind and rest your soul, then so be it. And if there are other days where you're up and about and you just do one or two things, so be it. But recognize that you're still here. I think when we're still here, we're here for a reason. So now it's to focus on, okay, Eve, what's the next thing I'm going to do, and just put one foot in front of the other. That's what I would say.
No, I really appreciate you sharing that. And even when you were sharing that, about this too shall pass. So having also come, about a year ago, I was in deep depression due to, just some personal stuff that was going on. Some of you might know, so when I had to leave my marriage and, having to deal with the divorce, which turned ugly, and then children involved. And it just reached a point where everything just came so much for me. I remember going into a really bad depression. I didn't even recognize it was depression until afterwards, and feeling suicidal and just feeling like, oh my gosh, my world is coming to an end and everything else. But like you said, as I went through that journey and came out of it, I started being able to reflect on all the things that God has done in my life over the years, going back far, helping me to come out of gangs, helping me to get through life or death situations, helping me get through previous addictions, and all that type of stuff. You get to the point and say, hang about, why would he bring me through all of those things, helping me through, a challenging childhood as well? Why did he bring me through all of those things just to spectacularly let me like die or fall apart here? And it's in that journey of just being able to overcome things that we get stronger, and we can see the reference points. It's just like you said, you get to that point where you're, okay, it's a season. This too shall pass. And actually at one point, there's going to be some point in the future, which I'm beginning to experience now, where you can look back on that and say, okay, now I get it. I'm grateful for it. And that's my conversation with God regularly at the moment. God, I'm grateful for what I learned through that process. I'm grateful that I went through it. I'm grateful that you brought me out of it. Please don't put that on my plate again, yeah? I'm good.
Actually, I'm interviewing a guy called Neil Donald Walsh next week who...
Okay.
No, it's not next week. And he wrote the book Conversations with God.
It's Conversation with God, right?
Conversation with God, yeah. And we're doing a live Q&A this weekend. Wow. So that's going to be interesting, because he was exactly the same. Homeless, out begging for change to buy French fries and maybe get enough for a happy meal. And now this book has been written, 9 series in the book, millions of copies sold, New York Times bestseller. And that was, exactly his thing. So you're right.
Awesome. Thank you very much for sharing that. Please do share the link towards that. I definitely want to tune in. I've read his books a couple of times, and they've also really helped me also on my journey. in my personal journey in understanding God. So beyond religion, but God more on a spiritual level, and having to connect with him. And also, like you said, helping to build my faith and hope that, whoa, this doesn't feel good right now. This doesn't make sense, but I'm trusting and believing that I'm going to get to the other side of this, and it will. And even if it doesn't, you're going to get me through this because that's just how you roll. So now, thank you very much. So please do share that so that we can all have a chance to watch that. And then finally as well, we've nearly been in lockdown for a year. What one thing do you miss the most and why?
Oh gosh, one thing do I miss the most? The computer's running now going, I miss this, but maybe not as much as I miss that. It's running the algorithm now. Like, no. Do you know what? Actually, it's something I didn't get to do, concerts, going out to events. And a friend of mine, Barry Thomas, he has a party night once or twice a year. And every single time he's run it, normally it coincides with a photo reading training. So I finished the training at 6:30. People are often there for an hour or two. They're just hanging out, talking, all the rest of it. And then I've got to be back in the room at 7:30 in the morning. So it's not possible to get to London, go out raving, and then come back. And the last time he was running one, I was able to go. So I booked my ticket. Due to unforeseen circumstances, they had to cancel. So we all got a refund. Then he reset the dates. I'm like, okay, I'm free. Book the ticket. COVID-19 lockdown. So I am looking forward to the BTM Club rave where I can go and shake a leg and let my hair down and have a good old party night out and just hear those 80s, 90s vibes and tunes, because I love music. I've been using music therapeutically since 1975. It feeds my soul. So to be out raving, I'm like, yeah, looking forward to that.
Do you think we're actually gonna get back to raving again, though?
Don't even go there. Don't
I'm just
even
asking a question. I don't know. Is it gonna be like masked raving? Is it gonna be social distance raving? Like, you're gonna have to learn a new stuff.
Pretty little soca with somebody behind you.
Yeah, don't come too close. The bouncers come in and kick you out. Oh, mate, you just broken the 2-meter rule. Get out.
No. I've got high hopes that I'm going to be out raving and might even rub off a little bit of wallpaper. You have to be a certain age to know what we're talking about there.
I know what you're talking about. Yeah, up for that. I hear ya. Awesome. So, Marilyn, I've really, really enjoyed this. You've blessed me. Like I said, I'm definitely getting onto that. I'm really gonna go look at the photo reading and get that into my to-do list. That's significantly gone up in my backlog because what you've just done is you've presented something that helps me to deal with a lot of the other stuff in my life, and it's just an effect. Actually, I can just consolidate it into one, and I can actually get through all of the information, all the other bits and pieces, because also some of them have become energy leaks for me, if I'm going to be honest, which is, I've got to do that. I've got that to do as well. I'm going to find time for that. Oh my gosh. Oh, there's so many things. But in effect, what you've just done is you give me a strategy, which means I can just consolidate that, get to the point where I can just snap it, get that information in. That's how I'm gonna. That's the sound that goes up. I'm one of those people. I'm a visual person with some sound, right? Audio as well. So I have to visualize and put the sound. So the sound effect for that is going to be snap, snap. Okay.
I love it.
Go, snap, snap. I've snapped it in. So thank you very much. So here's your website. So for those.
I'm just looking because somebody's saying, Addy, did you see my question? Thank you for. Did you see my question? And
yes.
Thank you for answering. It might be one and the same. We're good.
Yeah, that was a question regarding. I believe it was regarding is photo reading meditation, which you helped us to answer. Thank you very much. So for those watching right now, so if you're interested, which I'm sure you are, just pop over to Trance Formations, TM at the M.com. Right, and you'll be able to find a lot more about all the great stuff. We've only touched on a snippet of what Marilyn does. Okay, so but on there you can go out and find a lot more information. As I said, I will put underneath this video a direct link to the photo reading course for those of you who are also inspired to go away and learn more in less time. So that's where you can find that information, transformationstm.com. If you're on Insta, you can find Marilyn at the Neuro Success Coach with the underscores in there in the relevant places. So pop on over there. Make sure to do follow her. And then if you want to send any emails or any information, please do send it to Marilyn's email here. Also, I've tagged her in the video, so you should be able to connect with Marilyn if you've got any more questions want to know more about the courses and the value that she offers, then do go ahead and do that. So just as we start wrapping up as well, so just a reminder, you can follow us on YouTube, which is you just type in Circulate. On Insta, Circulate the Black Pound. Remember, we're all about trying to circulate the Black Pound. And as I always say, this is not exclusive. So we're not excluding everybody else. In effect, we recognize that as a community, we contribute to the wider society by adding value, which we already do. Increasing the amount of time that the money stays within our community helps us to be able to build our economic basis that we can contribute even more so. And this is open to everybody. So please feel free to follow us, Circulate the Black Pound, and also join the Facebook group where we provide information, people provide stuff that they're doing in terms of businesses, and also where we stream live. So this circulates, you can find it over again. So Marilyn, as we wrap up, I just wanted to say thank you for what you've shared today. I'm looking forward to continue to follow your success, the impact that you're having. And I really appreciate taking the time from your busy schedule to share the phenomenal and powerful, impactful information that you shared with us this evening with the audience. So thank you ever so much.
I just want to say thank you. And also, Adi, I want to say thank you for being so honest and open, because for those of you who are really listening, Adi was sharing at various points about, going through depression, going through challenging times, being at Tony Robbins, all of those. And one of the conversations I've had on Clubhouse is the fact that men don't always talk about their emotions. And I've also been in conversations where Black men don't talk about their emotions. So I really thank you for doing that. And I think it also, for me, because I was going to mention him earlier, but we went off in a different direction. I noticed Paul Lawrence in your opening montage. He was a man who was pioneering the kinds of conversations that you are having. And so it almost feels fitting that he was in because I was a guest on his show several times, and we had this discussion about Black men, emotions, mental health, opening up and having the strength and the courage to do that. So I really thank you for doing that as well, because even if one man hears you say that, we normalize it and make it okay not to be okay. And then seeing you and where you are now, it's like you can come through that. So I really thank you for being honest enough and open enough to be, dropping that into the conversation, because my ears were pricking up. I'm like, I'm noticing.
No, I appreciate that. And thank you also. Talking about Paul there. So as you know, like I said, myself, Brother Davis from Manhood Global Academy, and Freddie Nwaka, Freddie Cougar, we launched our podcast, Brothers Keepers, last week. We got our next one next week, which is intended actually to bridge that gap, because we recognize that, especially in the Black community, a lot of men there's a high number of depressions, mental illnesses, suicides, simply because as men, but particularly as Black men, we do not necessarily traditionally speak about what's going on. Paul was originally going to be one of the hosts as well on that show. So we'd already spoken about it. We actually created the idea together and started looking at and addressing that issue, because as you know, like you said, Paul's quite vocal. He speaks out about those things. So it came as a big shock when he passed away, because we was meant to launch on January the 14th. And the reason why, obviously, he's in the intro video was he was my first guest on Biz Talk. So he was a great friend, a great mentor. When I approached him, said, hey, here's what I'm trying to do. Here's the vision. He's like, hey, sign me up. And I even played with the idea after his passing. Do I actually change that on the video?
No, please
don't. No, I'm honoring
it.
It's from before he passed away. I'm honoring it, and that is what it is, because
it's all about the legacy. In terms of Circulate, we want people to recognize these faces and remember the names of the people who came before us and who paved the way, because those who come first and come early have a hard time, because we've got to break down all the barriers. And so the other people can now kind of glide on through to an extent. So yeah, even if you remake it, it'll be lovely that he could stay in there. Because when I saw that, I was like, oh yeah, lovely.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. So once again, I really appreciate what you're doing, and looking forward to your continued success. And like I said, I'll get your link directly to your photo reading from you. I'll place it underneath the videos, circulate that around as well. And I encourage anybody who's watching this, like you said, that is a practical thing that you can go away and change in your life. Within 3 days, you can be in a position. Just imagine in 3 days from the time you made that decision, you could be in a position where you could significantly change your life. Any exams that you've thought about taking, professional exams that you've thought about taking that in the past, you might have failed or you have fear of failure, here might be the answer to it. Any type of new field that you've been considering, can I go into? But hey, that's going to take me years, and I'm at this age. You know, I mean, in my head, I'm just like 30 books in a month. Like, really? Like, how many books is? I'm bad at maths. Just quickly, how many books is that by the end of the year?
Seriously, a shed load.
Wow. Do you know how much money that's worth?
That will be several hundred books. And the thing about it is, you're not reading those word for word. You're getting, well, you go through the whole book, so you're being exposed to all of it, but it's being able to just pull out what you need in minutes. And there are times you'll pick up a book that you photo, you open it, and it opens at the exact page you want. It's phenomenal.
And for me, I can't help but being a business person, actually equating that into return on investment. So I have no problem investing, thousands, tens of thousands a year in courses if I recognize the return on investment. When I'm hearing that, like, over 100 books, if you read over 100 books in even just one area, by the end of the year, do you know how much money you can command as an expert? You can just answer those questions just like that.
And imagine that, even to say over 300 books a year, when you say that number, people, but seriously, it's more than doable. And
yeah, they said before. Yeah, I think they said even if you read like one book a month, by the end of the year, you'd be like an expert in your field. If you're doing like 30, like what? Like this dude does everything. So yeah, there you go, people. So if there's another reason, there's a good reason for you to go away and maybe look at how you can actually get on that. And I'll put that link underneath. But once again, just want to wrap up right now and say thank you ever so much. It's been awesome. And I really appreciate everything you've done and contributed.
Thank you.
Great stuff. And so to everybody else, thank you for joining in. And the next show will be in, I believe, 2 weeks' time. Have a look out, as we're just trying to change the format with all the other bits and pieces going on. But yeah, thank you for joining, and we look forward to seeing you again soon. Until then, ciao for now.